Hey everyone, this is Charlie Shrem, and you're listening to Untold Stories. This is a show where we dive deep into the lives and personal histories of some of crypto's most influential leaders and find out how the crypto movement truly came to be. Let's dive in. I'm super excited that eToro is sponsoring Untold Stories because the CEO of eToro has been tweeting about Bitcoin since 2012. That's true OG. Now, eToro has become one of the largest crypto companies in the world, with over $1 trillion in trading volume per year. U.S. customers can trade the most popular crypto assets with extraordinarily low and transparent fees. And if you're not ready to trade yet, practice building your crypto portfolio with the eToro $100,000 virtual trading feature. Best of all, you can connect with 11 million other eToro traders around the world, myself included, to discuss trading, charts, and all things crypto. Create an account today at eToro.com. Links are in the show notes. And build your crypto portfolio the smart way. This episode of Untold Stories is sponsored by Scott Offord, the creator of crypto mining. Scott's a broker of ASIC mining gear and helps people buy and sell their miners. He created a Bitcoin mining profitability calculator and an interactive ASIC hardware comparison chart that you can find at cryptomining.tools. It's the only free online tool for calculating profitability and days to ROI. That includes the impact of the Bitcoin block reward halving. The calculator lets you put in your estimated uptime to give you a more realistic profit projections. So check it out and find Scott on Telegram and Twitter at OFFORDSCOTT. That's OFFORDSCOTT. Links are in the show notes. Untold Stories is powered by Blockworks Group, the only event and podcast production company I trust. For access to the premier digital asset conferences and in-depth podcast content, visit them at blockworksgroup.io. That's blockworksgroup.io. I promise you will not be disappointed. We have a very special guest today, Mr. Rajeev Chandrasekhar. Did I pronounce that right?
That's perfect.
Excellent. I worked hard this morning, by the way. I always want to make sure that I'm pronouncing everything correctly.
Super.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to give our listeners a very brief overview of who you are. You're an Indian politician and entrepreneur. You're a member of parliament in the upper house, and you're a member of the Bharatiya Janata Party, which is the party in power of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. You're also not only you're a member of parliament, but you're one of the most famous entrepreneurs of in India. You're on various committees like the Committee of Finance, the Standing Committee of Defense that I read here, and you're the founder of chairman of Jupiter Capital Limited, that owns a lot of media companies in India. It's safe to say that you know a little bit about the internet and how it works.
Yep, I think so. Yeah, and I think I started off as a tech entrepreneur, and I came back to India from the Silicon Valley, where I had a stint with Intel. And I built one of the earliest cellular mobile companies in the country. So I kind of know what it is to build something out in unconnected markets and to, sort of deliver connectivity to people who are sort of lacking it.
You said a quote earlier before we started recording. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I like saying this. I said, in 2014, when Prime Minister Modi first assumed office on the back of a fairly strong mandate. And he was one of the politicians that I looked up to because he was very invested in the idea of technology and governance and essentially disintermediating people from the conventional bureaucratic framework. So I remember saying then that India represented a great story because it was one of the fastest growing markets in terms of connectivity and connecting people. But at the same time, it remained one of the largest unconnected markets where a large number of Indians, and in 2014, it was almost 850 odd million Indians that remained outside of the internet and just lacked the basic connectivity and the ability to come online.
Looking at the policies of Prime Minister Modi and what has been worked on over the past few years, it seems like, and tell me if I'm wrong, it seems like his mandate and what, you guys as a party, what you're really focused on is giving people freedom, is giving people the ability to connect to each other for information, but also to grow business wise and to give individuality and more growth for the people of India.
And that is absolutely correct. And I just go further and say, if from a point of view of India, we've been a democracy for like 75 years now, coming on to 75 years. And it boggles the mind that even after 75 years of independence, there is 400 million odd Indians that still lived in poverty, and they were very clearly outside of falling outside the government system. And a lot of this was because of the conventional legacy architecture of how the government was structured, which is you had people sitting in these offices far away from population centers, and they were taking policy decisions that were in a lot of ways unconnected to what people were really going through. And technology, and Prime Minister Modi said this in 2013, before he became Prime Minister, that he believed that a nation as large as India, as diverse as India, as populated as India, can only address and the promise of delivering governance to each and every Indian if you use technology significantly in the process of governance. So what technology has done is essentially take government and governance to the doorsteps, if you may call it that, to a large population of Indians who never experienced or who had to struggle to experience governance. So I think that is, in a way, delivering freedom, real freedom. While we got freedom 75 years ago from British, I think the real freedom, individuality, and the power of a democracy is only now beginning to get through to a lot of people, in large measure due to the power of the internet and the power of connectivity.
How do you maintain, though, small government? Because I've read that's what your party and the Prime Minister have talked about, is maintaining a small, nimble government. And so far it's been successful. How do you do that in a country where the population is so large?
No, so look, I don't think, Charlie, I don't think I want to even pretend that we've reached the stage of creating a minimum government or a smaller footprint of the government just after 5 years. I think Prime Minister Modi and his team and a lot of us are trying to re-architect the concept of government. And of course, if you look at the history of India, we became independent from the British, then we flirted with about 6 decades of a quasi-socialist, statist model of governance, where big government, and government was everything. It owned airlines, it owned hotels, it owned everything under the sun, including delivering subsidies and benefits to the poor. To restructure that and to, in a sense, re-architect that footprint is not something that is trivial and that will just happen overnight. I think it's a process. I think technology is going to play a big role in how we take these big, large bureaucratic organizations that have been sitting on silos of information, silos of knowledge, silos of data for many decades, and sort of make them all interwork together for the benefit of giving faster, more responsive governance. We're not there yet, but that is clearly the vision, and that is clearly the direction we are headed in. And I think we've made some early steps towards that, but I think it'll take another 5 to 7 years for that whole restructuring and re-architecting, if you want to call it that, of government to complete.
People think that we're in that. A lot of people think that the internet revolution didn't happen until the early 2000s. A lot of people think that, the internet, cell phones, the internet wasn't really penetrated or used in daily life until the late 90s, early 2000s. And to some extent that's true. But realistically, the infrastructure and the groundwork for computers and the internet as we know it today happened as early as the 80s. You worked for Intel in the United States from the mid-80s, 1985, to the early 90s, 1991. You were part of the senior design team that actually designed the Pentium microprocessor, which is everyone has heard of the Pentium processor by Intel. Do you kind of see parallels between the cryptocurrency space today and the early 80s of designing microprocessors and the computers and the internet?
Oh, absolutely. I think the early days of the internet was all about us. It was not commercial in any sense. It was really about innovation. It was about people from all across the country, the US, of course, working together to build something that was exciting. And all the way to the early 90s, when I left Silicon Valley and came back to India to start cellular, the internet was something on the back of what we were all doing as an enabler. I mean, but it was really still not evident to a lot of us about how powerful that was going to become. I mean, I remember using that for having chats with fellow microprocessor architects in the East Coast, sitting in the Valley and talking about pipeline microprocessors and getting a lot of design ideas by just collaborating on the internet. But the true power of the internet, in my opinion, really took off in the early 2000s, as you said, when the commercial elements of that became very evident and obvious, and a lot of capital started flowing into it, and that triggered off the next wave of innovation. Now, in crypto, I believe it's the same thing. I think there has been it started off as demonstration of innovation. I can do this better than you, and a whole bunch of people coming together. And it is in my opinion, I mean, and I'm not an expert on crypto as much as you are, or so many of the other people who listen to this are, but I sense that it has been built with a sense of an almost utopian view of creativity and innovation. And then, of course, it's going off into different directions. And of course, now with the awareness of the net and the dangers or the benefits, the pushback to some of this is far earlier in the development of the crypto in terms of the cycle, rather than we faced in the internet, the evolution of the internet. So this is, in my opinion, it's not very different from where we were in the early 90s, but it's the challenges and the regulatory involvement and the legal, trapdoors and challenges that it's going to go through are far more complex at this early stage of its evolution compared to, let's say, what the internet faced at its end.
That's a very good point. I never really thought of that, because a lot, I thank you for bringing that point, because a lot of people, and I'm one of them, I feel like I draw parallels to the early internet and I draw parallels to the early crypto space. But from what I understand, what you're saying is the dangers, the trapdoors, and the issues that we have in the early crypto need to be addressed now instead of waiting. Rather, with the internet in the early 80s and 90s, there was more time to kind of let things play out and see where they lead.
Exactly. And part of this is in the public policy space, in the space that is, let's say, the anti-innovators, if you want to call it that, which is government, which is the control guys. The awareness of about the internet and things that are happening on the internet is far more evolved now than, let's say, they were in the early 90s or the late 80s. So the regulators, it's pretty clear that the FCC and all of those regulators in the US or Europe or indeed India, when we started things here, were completely, they were absent. They weren't anywhere on the radar, and they just came into it when problems started sort of popping up here and there. But in this case, in the crypto space, given there's almost like a perfect storm that is facing the growth and the innovation momentum of crypto, which is you have the law and order and the terrorism and the cyber security concerns on one hand, and then you have the pretty clearly heightened awareness about the internet not being all good and having some potential of these little evil pockets sort of resting within them. And therefore, the regulators using that as a justification to sort of snoop around or get more involved. These two things are almost causing an inevitable over intrusion, if you want to call it that, or almost a sort of a putting braking effect on what would otherwise have been of faster growth, a lot more innovation that you'd see in the whole crypto space.
You're right. There are definitely two sides to it, and so there's a huge campaign right now in India called India Wants Crypto. And it seems like on Twitter, it has gotten millions and millions of impressions. Mm. I think the movement understands, well, I hope they would understand, the position of the government needs to protect its people and it needs to protect consumers who are unaware. And yes, there are a lot of scams and there are, black markets and domestic terrorism and things like that. But I guess on their side, they're saying, how come the government hasn't decided to talk to us, to let us help you develop things? Self-regulatory bodies are really the ones that are the precursor to a lot of regulations. I'm sure there weren't a lot of regulations when you had brought cellular technology to India, and you developed your own regulations, and eventually the government adopted those regulations. Do you think that could happen in India with crypto?
So here's the thing, Charlie. We in the entire cyber technology space, our policy framework and our regulatory architecture is really playing catch up. It's not unusual for a country like ours.
Yes.
It's playing catch up everywhere, but I think ours is playing catch up now. One of the things, I don't know if you're aware, but I was the one who petitioned the Supreme Court, amongst a few others, that privacy ought to be a fundamental right for all Indians. And in 2016, the Supreme Court of India ruled that privacy is a fundamental right for all Indians. Now, privacy.
Can you get the United States Supreme Court to say that too? Because we really need that.
Yeah, but in our case, when you say fundamental right, it's subject to some restrictions, and those restrictions are usually defined by national security exceptions. For example, if the government does have a legitimate case and can prove to a court or an appropriate body that the privacy of that particular person can be breached because it affects the larger public interest, that privacy right goes away or sort of stands cancelled. So we have that, and we have obviously all of the innovation that is represented by the entire rapidly growing crypto space. We are now in the process of moving towards, in my opinion, a legislative framework and a legal framework that will allow innovation to happen, that will allow people to collect data from consumers, provided consumers consent and all of that. I'm mixing up crypto and privacy deliberately because from a policy framework, Charlie, these things...
They go hand in hand.
They go hand in hand, yes. So, but we have to address the big sort of elephant in the room, which is the issue of access that the government will seek on these national security, for reasons. So that is where privacy and crypto, and that is where we are now in the middle of a discussion of evolving. What are those exceptions, and how can the government's national security agencies be provided access to material that they believe are material in the larger public interest? So that conversation is underway, and I suspect that the crypto guys in India will also be part of that conversation. I just finished, for example, over the last 3 weeks, a detailed roundtable consultation with pretty much every stakeholder, the large technology companies, the small startups, the foreign companies, asking them their view about this issue of data localization. Because there is, for example, there's a view that all of those companies that harvest data of Indian consumers must keep that data in India and not use it in servers across in whichever, China or wherever. And the movement of that data should be very effectively regulated. Now, these are all these are all conversations that are underway today. So we have like I said, we have on one hand the national security folks, the people who really believe genuinely and passionately that the country must be secure, and therefore that should drive public policy making, and that should drive everything. And then you have on the other side the innovators. I personally believe that these should not be 180 degrees, differentiated in phase. There is no. I believe strongly that these two can be on the same side, provided we work out a mutually acceptable way of accessing that data, and mutually acceptable in the sense mutually acceptable and legally consistent way of accessing data in these emergencies, national security emergencies. And so that conversation is underway. Yeah,
I think the crypto community, which is growing, and India has the power to be one of the largest crypto. It already is. So I've been working for years, but I think India has the potential power to be the largest and most innovative crypto industry in the world, because as you know, a lot of people are leaving the United States and are leaving Europe and going to a lot of countries in Southeast Asia, and a lot of people are moving to India as well. And so you wrote back in December, you wrote a letter to the finance minister and the governor of the RBI, and you wrote that there are already reports of a surge in domestic Bitcoin trade, and there are, as well as a moving of black economy to the dark internet. The surveillance and policing requirements are challenging, and then you continued on to write, I am drawing your attention to the need to be ahead of the curve on this rather than behind. So the RBI must develop the capabilities on this urgently. That was a very powerful letter that you wrote, and for all intents and purposes, very, very bullish if I was reading that. But it seemed like the RBI took the opposite approach and instead basically told all banks in the country, don't work with any crypto companies at all. And there's a whole Supreme Court ruling going on right now. Why do you think they took that stance?
And this is, Charlie, I am part of the system now. So, I have to be smart about how I say this. You see, there are two ways of addressing a problem in any governmental system. One is to say we will be smarter than the guys who are innovating, and we will just be ahead of the curve, and we will engage with them on a basis of almost equal domain knowledge and capability. But that's hard work for anybody in the government to do. That's hard work for anybody in the public space to do, which is get up to speed and innovate as much as some of the smarter guys. So therefore, there is an almost instinctive response by those who sense a threat to use a hammer on the threat, which is to say, look, let's just shut down that threat by bolting it into some room and shutting the door. It is not the way I would like it. I would not want innovation to be trampled by a paranoid approach to regulation, because paranoid approach to regulation just means the safest way to handle things is just shut the door on everything and just say no to innovation, and nobody will be worried about anything excepting the consumer who will suffer with limited choice in terms of innovation. So I think that is what the RBI did, which is to say, oh, here's a problem. Somebody just flagged that a lot of the black money that we were trying to address through reducing cash in the economy is going to go underground. And so instead of figuring out how to do this better and how to keep an eye on the dark internet and keep an eye on Bitcoin movement and creating some capability within our system, let's just say it's illegal. And so then anybody who does that will be scared to death about doing it. This is not unusual. And I think my own view is that at some point we will have to get to a place as India and other countries around the world where we are able to look at innovation and support innovation, but are capable of regulating innovation wherever innovation creates problems in public interest. But that's having said that, it's not easy to create in the government. It is, if I was the RBI or you were in the RBI, we could possibly do it. It's not easy to just get that.
Well, yeah, because there's a huge job they have to do because they have to basically go on both sides and appease
Yes.
innovation, but also appease. I'd like to play a clip. I'd like to play a clip that I was sent this morning from someone who looks up to you, and he'd like to meet you and try to work with you. Wayne, can we play the first clip?
Hi Charlie, Namaste Mr. Rajiv. My name is Nischal Shetty and I'm the founder and CEO of WazirX, which is a cryptocurrency exchange based out of India. My first question to you is there was a recent crypto report released by a committee set up by the government of India, which recommends a ban on crypto in India. But none of the industry experts were consulted or involved in this. So, can we expect industry participation to make the report more positive and better for our crypto ecosystem in India?
So my response to Nishal is, I think, those of you who have a view on crypto and believe that there is sufficient room in the public policy space for the policies to evolve and to be inclusive of innovation and at the same time address these national security and other concerns, they should just reach out to me. And, I have the ability to create, let us say, documents with your inputs and have that presented either in parliament or to the government. So don't worry about what goes on in government, and that is one particular point of view. India is a fairly vibrant democracy in the sense that you can still approach people like me and evolve an alternate view and have that alternate view be discussed, narrated, and debated within government. I can do that. I'd encourage you to reach out to me.
We'll put your Twitter handle in the show notes. But thank you for responding to that. eToro is crypto trading made easy. It's one of the largest and smartest trading platforms in the world with extraordinarily low and transparent fees. Join myself and 11 million other traders and create an account at eToro.com. Links in the show notes, and build your crypto portfolio the smart way. As a mining equipment broker, Scott Offord wants to make sure his clients are well informed and making data-backed business decisions. Scott created the only free online tool for calculating profitability and days to ROI for miners. It's a better way to compare the efficiency of various models of ASIC miners and to see how the price of the miner and the efficiency impacts your mining profitability. So, check it out at cryptomining.tools and find Scott on Telegram and Twitter at OFFORDSCOTT. That's OFFORDSCOTT. It seems like here in the United States, government is not approachable. And the people that are, on the ground here, we don't feel like we have the ability to really talk to the ones that are really in the positions to help draft legislation. And I think if we look at the countries where you are able to do that, Switzerland, for example, a lot of countries in Europe, in Asia, Singapore, Hong Kong, their style of governments enable people to really approach. Even in the UAE, you're seeing the same type of things. What kind of parallels do you see between governance? What are your thoughts on governance itself? Because you come from the technology space, you have a lot of views on privacy that are really good, and now that you're in the government, tell me, what was that like your first day and, kind of sitting in your chair in your office and saying, wow, now I'm in the government. What was that like?
So Charlie, just so, unless you are seeing the future that I don't see, I'm not in the government yet. I'm in parliament. So unless you have some crystal ball gazing that you're doing and you see me in the government soon, no, I'm not in government, but I am in the party that is in government, and I am fairly actively involved in advocating issues that I'm very passionate about with the government. For example, the whole issue of net neutrality. The reason India is so far ahead of the US on the way we look at the internet is because, I got a whole bunch of people to sit around a table and be very clear about how they wanted the future of the internet to be in India. And we very strongly worked with the regulator and the government, and the Prime Minister responded and said, yes, we will not distort the free and open nature of the internet just because a few telcos wanted it, which is precisely what happened, which is precisely not what happened in the US. So we have, in my opinion, in India, a government that is open, does not have an ideological view on these things, but has obviously a responsibility to be taking care of the safety and security of all of the people of this country, and therefore they will always look at this issue and any other issue as is reasonably expected for them to do so, by saying, look, what if this is innovation? We don't have a problem with it, but when it does represent a certain problem, tell us how we can fix that, or how you can fix that for us. So that conversation applies even to crypto, and I think it is, instead of making this about government versus innovators, I actively encourage people to come sit with me and believe in my ability to articulate their positions and their points of view to people in government and the leadership of the government, and hopefully persuade them to do the right thing.
I will help organize that and actually come out. You invited me once, but I'm definitely going to take you up on that and come out. I've never been to India, but I've wanted to for so long, and here's a good reason for me to come.
Yes,
when did you hear about crypto for the first time, and what were your original thoughts about it? Do you follow technology that's on the cusp, on the leading edge?
Yeah. Look, that is in my DNA. I mean, I may be a politician today, and I deal with water problems and road problems and electricity problems and corruption issues and all of that. But innovation and people who innovate are people that I respect a lot, because that is in my DNA. I really look up to people who, even in today's world, are out there confidently, creating the new Wild West, if I can use that phrase. But so I am very plugged into technology. I can't say that I can still code the way I used to do 15 years ago or 20 years ago.
It's like riding a bicycle.
Yeah, I know, but I'm told, I used to do it in C, and I used to write 10,000 lines of code, and now I'm told there are, easier ways of doing this, and the languages are much more easier, and you don't have to compile it and link it and create exec files and all of that. So anyway, the point is that I am quite plugged in. The first time I heard about crypto was really when I was looking at blockchain. And I looked at blockchain, and as I was reading up and understanding from people, I then moved on to crypto and the whole, the cryptocurrency bit. And then obviously, you got immersed in that and was fascinated by that. And then because I was in the public policy side of things when I was reading this, immediately the questions were, how do you manage the anonymity? How do you manage issues in a country like India, where we already have a problem with black money and a parallel economy? Will this feed into that, or will that feed into this? So I approached it almost like a marriage of a technology aficionado plus a public policy maker, and that's how I got interested in it.
That's very interesting that you brought up the underground economy. What's that really like? A few years ago, I believe higher denomination bills were taken out of circulation, and that was to combat like corruption and illegal black market. Are things like that still happening, and has it been a problem for a long time?
Yeah, I think it has been one of the biggest problems in India for several decades now, which is that this unaccounted wealth. I mean, and I don't want to bore you, but it's a complex picture of very low tax compliance and a very few people bearing the tax burden, therefore having to pay high rates of taxes, and a large number of people who are earning money in buying things, buying expensive cars, essentially doing that with almost tax exempt money, because They never disclosed their incomes, and that is what was the parallel economy. That, of course, also fed into crime and all of that other stuff that we don't want. So there were two real rationales for the demonetization. One is to almost force the migration of the illegal untaxed income into the taxed income bracket, so that the tax net could widen and therefore the tax rates for good, honest salary earners moderate over time. So there was that motivation. And the other motivation was that this black economy was also feeding the criminal enterprises and all of the downstream activities that go from that. So that was necessary to do. And it was necessary to do because for the last 70 years in India, that has been the bane of politics. It has been the bane of electoral politics, politicians, crime, all of that. So when you talk about crypto, the natural concern or paranoia would be, by creating this, are we going back, or are we transitioning from a cash economy, cash black economy, to something that is even less traceable and more difficult to crack? Because cash is, at the end of the day, you can always, go into somebody's house and find out stacks of currency notes that have been piled up there or not. This is a lot more sophisticated and definitely not something that a normal constable on a beat can pick up on. So
there is a war on cash going on around the world.
Absolutely.
And it's like a lot of governments don't want people using cash at all. Do you see like a world where we don't have physical cash? And I also want to say one comment about what you said before. I actually, I talk to a lot of regulators consistently, and the ones that are involved in not only regulating, but also enforcing will say that actually it's a lot easier to do crime with cash than it is with Bitcoin and with crypto. And in fact, they almost like it when criminals try to use cryptocurrency because they're stupid, and it's easier to track them down when they're using cryptocurrency than it is when they're using cash.
No, so I think those are the points that have to be made. From India's perspective, the war on cash, if you want to call it that, has got two dimensions. Like I said, one is to make sure that there is more tax compliance. We want the government revenues to grow and have the government revenues grow robustly and realistically, given the nature and size of the economy. So there is one that aspect is about just basically making sure tax evasion does not happen, and cash
taxes are being paid. Yeah,
yes.
Of course.
So the way, if you have income and expenses all going down the cash route, you effectively don't have to pay tax because there's no paper trail. So that was the main challenge of making sure tax compliance and the tax GDP ratio went up. The second part of that was this crackdown on crime, because criminal enterprises obviously will only deal in cash. Because of anonymity reasons. And so if the argument can be made that crypto is actually better on the issue of criminal enterprises and the black economy, that's something that the awareness on that has to be built. But those are the two issues that we face today, and that is the reason for India's crackdown on cash. It may be a little different from the US, and it could be very different from, let's say, how UK is doing it in terms of migrating everybody to a digital, cash platform. And by the way, that is what the Prime Minister of India wants, which is to have the component of currency in the economy progressively go down as more and more of India and more of Indians move towards digital payment solutions. Digital payment solutions also with crypto and anonymity, that is something that we need to build awareness and understanding about.
Just because I'm curious, yeah. What is the current, like just an overgeneral, and my curiosity, what it is?
It ranges. It can go up to almost 42-45%.
Okay, well in the U.S. here it's 40% in a higher bracket because we have the state and state and federal taxes. What about corporate taxes?
Yeah, we are all in the same ballpark. It's all 40-45%. And you have some surcharges for the corporate for corporate India, But reason, I'll tell you the reason why we absolutely need lower taxes in the long term is that India is an economy that is still driven a lot by credit. We haven't over the last 70 years created the equity space. We haven't created equity in the amounts that our economy requires. And our goal is to, for example, be a $5 trillion economy by 2025. And the only way you can create equity is by making sure some of these profits of these corporates are available for reinvesting. So if you tax 40%, you're almost saying that, yeah, okay, some of the shareholders get some money, but there's not very much left to invest and expand the overall equity capital base of the nation. And so gross equity formation is, in my opinion, directly linked to moderate taxation over the long term, which is in turn linked to better tax compliance, which is in turn linked to...
That's what I was going to ask you. Yeah. Do you think lower taxes, which sounds great, will lead to more compliance?
I think so. I think there is enough empirical evidence in India that shows that the higher the taxes, the more the incentive for evasion.
The more complicated the taxes, too. Here in the U.S., taxes are so complicated. It's just no one even knows what to do most of the time.
Yeah, so no, I don't think that's it's very different from the UK or from India or from any other country. I think the tax gurus in all countries are kind of like lawyers. They're all exported from some planet out in space, and they came in here as an alien. So no, I think that is true for everybody. I think it becomes a problem for India because if you have a very small percentage of the population paying the taxes for a large part of the nation, that puts an unusually high burden on a very small percentage of people who are all working hard. And I'm not talking about the billionaires and the crony capitalists alone. I'm talking about the actual middle class who are going out there, working a good job, trying to build a future for their families. In my opinion, it's unfair for them to be paying 35% taxes. I think they should be paying 10, 15% taxes in the long term and having money to save, to spend, to invest in, whether it's invest in markets, whether it's invest in commodities, build a stronger equity capital base for their future generations. So I think that's the direction we want to go. That's the direction the Prime Minister intends to take India. And a big part of that is to ensure everybody who earns pays a fair share of taxes, rather than only those who believe in complying with the law pay the taxes.
How involved should a central bank be in, and this is more of a macro question, there are some economies that are very standoffish and let markets, do whatever they're going to do. And there are some other, countries and governments where the central bank manages everything with a heavy touch. Where do you think India falls into play here? How involved do you think the central bank should be in the economy on a day-to-day basis?
No, I think the RBI does a reasonably good job and is a banker that's had a good track record compared to some of the other central banks, including the US. They are very loath to intervene in currency markets. You don't see the Reserve Bank of India trying to set floors or set ceilings on the currency. And so there's a lot of market determined currency levels there. Of course, the Reserve Bank of India does manage a very conservative monetary stance. I mean, they do inflation management, inflation targeting very effectively, because that affects inflation in India, unlike, let's say, the US or other advanced economies. Inflation is like an additional tax on the poor. So if foodstuff, sort of grow at 10% per 20% per year, it's basically affecting the household disposable income and survivability of a lot of poor people. So inflation management, they do very, very well. We've had now 5 years of extremely low inflation with reasonably high nominal growth levels. So they do that. And I don't think the Reserve Bank of India is, you can characterize them as a very interventionist central bank. And as a matter of fact, some of the problems that we are facing in the economy today, for example, in the public sector banking system, with all these bad loans that have accumulated over the last 10 years, are a result of the Reserve Bank of India taking a slightly non-interventionist view on issues like bank regulation, which is also in their scope of responsibilities.
A lot of people that have reached out to me on Twitter think that the government of India thinks that are ignorant of crypto and thinks that it's a Ponzi scheme. Now, I don't agree with that, but obviously there are some that you've talked about earlier that are not being more open-minded. What percentage of people, of members of parliament, what percentage of politicians, of bankers, I mean, where do they fall on a spectrum? Do you think a lot of them agree with you? Do you think that they're more in the middle, on the right side? How do the cards fall?
Well, Charlie, I mean, this will sound a bit immodest, but and I'm not trying to be modest. I think the issues that I take on tend to be issues that are, by my own definition, slightly ahead of the curve. And so by that, you can safely assume that a lot of the government and the members of parliament will come a little late to that party. I mean, they sort of eventually get there, but it's something that they don't.
Will it be too late?
You see, I don't know. You see, so far the battles that I've fought, whether it's privacy, whether it's net neutrality, whether it's, all of these things, everybody told me, look, this is never going to work. People are never going to understand. It's too sophisticated. It's anti-establishment. People don't get it. I don't think so. I think anything that's good for the country, anything that's presented as being good, anything that's presented with the bads of it being mitigated with these kind of solutions, A, B, C, D, like that, will find an audience. I mean, I'm sorry to go back to this, but for example, the net neutrality battle that was won effectively in India was a battle that was not easy to win. There were big.
You were coming from your background is in telco and everything. What was that like?
No, exactly right. So, and I believe then that the consumers of India were getting the short shrift. I think, and at the end of the day, we keep talking investors and building capacity and building infrastructure, but the narrative had to move to the interests of the consumer, and that a free and fair internet was core to the interests of the Indian internet consumer. And that conversation, while I started alone, was quickly joined by almost 500,000, 600,000 people online. We had a joint petition that was submitted to the telecom regulator. That then hit the media. Then that hit, that went on to get the Prime Minister's attention. And then I wrote a number of letters, raised it in Parliament. And the government's policy became what it is today. So I am not a person that says, no, this is a tough subject. Let's just give up. Nobody seems to understand it. Let's just walk away and say, to hell with this. That's not the way I operate. And I don't think that's the way any innovation or any group of people who want the innovation or innovators to succeed in India must approach this. Yes, there is going to be skepticism. Yes, there's going to be resistance. But I mean, if everything was so easy, then, everybody would be doing it. So I think I'm not prepared to say that this is tough and India will lose out on this because a few people don't understand it. I think
I'm just worried. I'm worried because the Reserve Bank of India imposed restrictions now that can severely cripple the Indian crypto community, which is one of the largest in the world. Yeah.
So Charlie, like I said to the gentleman Nishal earlier, I said, they should get together. They should engage with those in public life instead of sniping from the sidelines.
I agree.
Get into the mainstream and engage, have a conversation, discuss it, be challenged, challenge people right back, and then see at the end of the day what happens, what comes out of it. But to sit and stand on the sidelines, sort of in the shadows, and saying that look, we are way smarter than everybody else, and people just don't get us. and then complain and whine later on, then you only have yourself to blame.
Right now, there's a Supreme Court ruling there's going on, and I know that the Internet and Mobile Association of India is representing the crypto community, and the dates keep getting extended. But can we see a favorable outcome with that? Can we see? This is this is as of a few weeks ago, and it's going on. Can they reach out to you? Can we see a favorable outcome, or at least some?
No. I haven't studied the case. I don't know what they're arguing. I know kind of from the media that this is going on. I frankly haven't got a piece of paper in front of me. Nobody sent me anything.
Sure.
I'm happy to look at it. I'm happy to even suggest an approach that is workable, if there is any room for that. And I'm happy to engage. I never say no to having a conversation with anybody on any issues related to technology.
How can people in India, and I'm asking more for myself, because I would emulate here in the U.S. the same answers, but how can Indians get involved in policy making in industry? Like, is there an official avenue to participate, and not just with crypto, but with anything? What's that like in India?
But Charlie, I think obviously you're not aware, but it's a pretty vibrant democracy. On every issue, people are engaged. I'm engaged with people, all forms of people. They discuss. I'm engaged with groups of people who want better roads in their neighborhood. I want groups of people who want illegal massage parlors shut down in their residential neighborhood. And on one spectrum, and I'm on one end of the spectrum, and I'm engaged with people who want, better policies for data protection. So there is a lot of engagement and interaction between elected representatives and the people. It is vibrant. Social media just made it even easier. I get hundreds and thousands of emails and DMs and messages and on Facebook from people and I meet people all the time. And I'm not speaking just for myself. This happens across the board for all of our parliamentarians. So it's a question of, depending on what your issue is, connecting to one of the many MPs who's online, who's on Twitter, who's on Facebook, or whose mobile number is available online, and reaching out to him and seeking a meeting and engaging with him.
You put your money where your mouth is, because here we are talking, and I reached out to you on Twitter, and here we are. So to my listeners listening, he's not just saying this. The way we were able to even talk is just meeting over Twitter. It seems like, from what I understand, and I see it on Twitter too, the crypto community in India needs to get more active, needs to get more involved, needs to not just complain about what the issues are, but actually get involved as much as possible. Because in India, you have the ability to do that, where in the US, you don't.
Yeah, like I said, I say engage with people who can understand you, who have a point of view, and then have a conversation. Because without a conversation, you know what the result is going to be. And with the conversation, there's at least the odds of somebody listening to you, hearing you out, and understanding you.
Mr. Chandrasekhar, thank you so much for coming on the show and taking the time out. I really appreciate it. I think this was a very vibrant and good conversation, and I hope that my fellow crypto brothers and sisters in India are listening and reach out to you, and this leads to some really good things.
Thanks, Charlie, and thank you for doing what you're doing. Keep doing that. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. Thank you. This episode of Untold Stories is sponsored by Scott Offord, the creator of Crypto Mining. Scott's a broker of ASIC mining gear and helps people buy and sell their miners. He created a Bitcoin mining profitability calculator and an interactive ASIC hardware comparison chart that you can find at cryptomining.tools. It's the only free online tool for calculating profitability and days to ROI. That includes the impact of the Bitcoin block reward halving. The calculator lets you put in your estimated uptime to give you a more realistic profit projections. So check it out and find Scott on Telegram and Twitter at OFFORDSCOTT. New episodes go live every Tuesday at 7 a.m. EST. Links to our Apple and Spotify channels are in the show notes. You can also follow me on Twitter, Charlie Shrem, to continue the conversation. See you next week.